Hello everyone, this is GrindCore for Deuces Cracked. This is part 5 of the Thin Red Line. Instead of the usual concept or hand history review at the start of the video and the session and hand analysis at the end, I'll be doing a post-production commentary on this video because I've been having some PC problems and I lost the sound for the video, so there's no audio. So yeah, I can pause anyway on all the interesting hands and talk a little bit more about it, so there's no hand to analyze any hands at the end. And if there's any interesting concepts that come up, I can also pause a little longer on there, so there's also no real need for the normal first 5 minutes of the rest of the previous videos in the series. Alright, so I just sat down. I realized on everyone. Played one hand here, but can't remember what happened. So just starting the video. I started the session by just, except table 4, I started the session by just sitting down at 3 tables where people were playing heads ups. So if they're not fish, then they're probably good regulars, because the mediocre regulars tend to shy away from heads up and only the better regulars will actually sit down with someone else or start their own table. So that was yeah, I remember that hand. The first hand at the table, I opened in blind versus blind with, I think it was pocket queens, and the flop was monotone. Yeah, the flop was monotone, and I checked to let him bluff at it. But he checked back, and then I double barreled, and he hero called me down with pocket deuces without a flush draw, and the board was paired on the turn as well. So that's already a sign that he's not the average nitty regular that won't ever bluff catch, but probably more of a thinking player. Here with the pocket tens, the flop was 3-way. I should probably just have check folded because he's not bluffing very often on a board like this into 3 people. But yeah, I had the gut shot, I had the heart. It's somewhat close, but it's probably a check fold. Right, here with the pocket jacks, both players have already 3-bet me, and since they were playing heads up and are likely aggressive regulars, I can flat to let necked squeeze, but there's also a really good chance of me getting 4-bet bluffed here, or even cold 4-bet bluffed. So instead of flatting to trap, I think it's actually better to 3-bet to trap, so to speak. So I was considering flatting to let the guy on my left squeeze, but ended up 3-betting, hoping for a 4-bet bluff. So yeah, definitely getting it in with the jacks. And he did fold. So he's already made a hero call and a called 4-bet bluff. So he's an opponent that you have to be careful against. He's going to put you in tough spots. For example, in blind versus blind, I'm not opening 100% of my hands against him. And if I'm on the cutoff and he's on the button, I'm not stealing super wide, I'll play pretty tight. Here on this table, I check heads up. I check back the jack deuce to represent showdown value on that board, and I turn the third nut flush draw, but when he bets, I don't think he's expecting me to fold, because it's a good board to c-bet. So, he's probably value betting, and there's no point in drawing. So here with the ace-3 in blind versus blind, normally I just open, but against really aggressive players it kind of sucks if you get 3-bet. It's a decent hand to 4-bet bluff, but he might even 5-bet bluff, or 3 and 5-bet with a wide value range. So against these player types, instead of open raising, I like playing an open limping strategy, because they tend to auto raise their decent hands, any suited Broadway, pairs, and they only check their really weak hands. So every time that they check, you can just bet at the flop as if you have the initiative, and if they call, they usually have a bottom pair type hand or a second pair no kicker, and you can barrel at a very wide variety of turn and river cards. But in this case I actually flopped a 3, so there's no real point in bluffing at the pot. I beat all his 3s, so unless he has a 9, maybe he checks a queen. But given how aggro he has been over the small sample, he probably raises a queen. So he has a 9 or air, and then it's better to check to let him bluff. So he pots, which I'm quite happy about, so I'll just start calling him down. Now I'm really happy with my hand, because he's definitely not betting a 9 anymore on this turn card, and if his hand was suited, he'd likely have raised pre-flop. So it's more likely that he turned to draw, or is pure bluffing. The king is a pretty safe card, because he probably raises a king pre-flop, so the only hand I'm really afraid of is a hand like Jack 2's offsuit, Jack 4 offsuit. So if he bets again here, I'm definitely calling. But he checks back, and he actually had a suited queen, which I would expect him to have raised pre-flop. Also, if he had raised pre-flop, I would have limp raised bluffed him there. I find that the first response people give to that is usually fold, and then the second time they sometimes start calling lighter. So the first time it's very safe to do it as a bluff, and the second time you have to be more careful, depending on the player type. Maybe he anticipated my limp raise if he has seen my videos or something. And in that case it was a good check. Some chat going on this table between Bad Beater and U2 Killers. Bad Beater apparently has a website about U2 Killer's career and wants to interview him. So I'm guessing Bad Beater is part of table ratings or something, and U2 Killers is probably some insane grinder. If he was really good, he probably wouldn't be playing 1-2 but mid-stake, so it's more likely that he's just a very high volume grinder than that he is extremely good. I flat here in the big blind. I could 3-bet for value, but I haven't been 3-betting much. My only 3-bet I actually 5-bet shoved. So he has an aggressive image from cold 4-bet bluffing and already having 3-bet before, but my only 3-bet at the table I actually 5-bet bluffed, so my image is somewhat clean, and because of that I think it's better to flat with the ace-10, because he seems kinda aggro and ace-10 flops nice bluff catchers that I can check call him with. And if I 3-bet, I'm not sure that he actually calls with much worse, and I'm also not really sure what to do when he 4-bets, because there's a reasonable chance he's bluffing, but there's also a chance that he's 4-bet calling ace-queen offsuit, and then 5-bet bluffing him with ace-10 would be horrible. So I opted just flat. Now on the flop, most people c-bet polarized. I'll check a 9 here. So I beat most of his air, so it's a pretty safe board to check call, just like you can check call here with pocket 6s. You can even argue that ace-10 is better to check call here than a hand like pocket 6s, because he will barrel at the ace. And I can dominate some of his overcard hands, while if I have pocket sixes, his overcards are always clean outs. Now the turn here brings a lot of draws, backdoor flush draw, numerous straight draws and gut shots. And if he's the type to c-bet a 9, most people then check back the turn, they don't double barrel a hand like a 9 here. So when he double barrels here, it's either a king or some sort of gut shot or better draw. And since there's so many draws possible, and he might even be the type that checks back a weak king on the flop, trying to be tricky or something. He seems to be really aggro so far, and really aggro players tend to be quite dishonest and sometimes check when they have something. So I'm weighting his range more towards draws in this spot. So if I can continue because I beat draws, but if I do so, I must check call another bet on the river. I also have the option of check raising here, but there's no real point in it. It sucks if I get shoved on, or if he just calls and then I check the river and he shoves. It's just unnecessary. Don't really see many upsides to it. So I decide to not check fold here, but check call because the turn card brings so many draws that he can barrel with, and he seems very aggro. Yeah, so here I was I just paused the video. Here I'm actually explaining all that during the live play, which is why I'm time banking. Very good river card. This pocket nines hand on the right is also gonna be interesting. But yeah, so I'm gonna check call on the top left because so many draws missed and he seems very aggro, and he might not even value bet a hand like king 10 or something, because what worse can really call him. Because I was talking about this hand, I accidentally checked the pocket nines here against the fish. Obviously I should have c-bet that, but that's just because I was talking about the hand on the top left. So yeah, he had a gut shot and I was good there. Fish bet's really small on the turn. I could raise because he might call with ace high, but I think calling is better to let him bluff again with his random air, and on the ace river I can't really value bet. So I just check it back. And he actually flopped the boat, so I made a brilliant misclick check on the flop. Here I c-bet the ace king. I could check call it to let him bluff air, but I think after the last hand he's gonna be a little bit less inclined to bluff. So I'm just giving him free cards if he has air. So I opt to just c-bet bluff it. And it's not necessarily even a bluff because he could call it with a draw, or even if he calls it with a pair, there are turn cards I can represent. I can hit an ace or a king. And the fish is tilting in the chat that I checked my overpair to his flop boat. Accidentally took the note I wanted to take on the fish on this guy. Here the fish min raised I call with 6-7 suited, and on the board where I flop an open ender, the aggressive regular donk bet. Now it could be a draw, it could be for value, it could be a total bluff. I don't think he's really doing it as a total bluff often, because the fish only min raised and I only called, so I can easily have all sorts of suited connectors that are all over this board. So it's most likely for value or a draw, and I don't want to raise for that reason, because I just fold out hands like gut shots and I get called by his value bets. So I just call and then I turn the nuts. On the top right I see I bluffed the flop, and even though I hit a pair, there's nothing I can really do. When he bets, just have to check fold. So yeah, he bets again on the turn, and I can raise or call here. The hands I get value from if I raise are probably sets and a hand like top 2. But those hands will value bet the river anyway. And if he has some sort of hand like ace-3 suited, with the gut shot he might fire a third barrel on the river. And I can always raise all in over his river bet and still stack his sets. So I opted just to flat, but raising is fine too. Very unfortunate river card with the board pairing. If he had some sort of gut shot with spades that barreled the turn he now got there, obviously his set sucked out on me. But if he has a set, he probably just keeps betting here, because I might have some sort of 9 that I'm just checking back here. So when he checks, I'm actually, he either has a 9 himself, a hand like ace-9, or any 9 really, or he's going for a check raise all in with the boat. And I expect him to probably bet with the boat mostly here, but for some reason a lot of regulars, when they boat up, they just check for no particular reason. That's just what tag fish do. They check when they hit a boat. And it's also pretty much the only hand they check raise on the river, the nuts. They just check raise purely because it's the nuts, not because they actually have good reasoning for check raising. So I'm kind of worried that he could be going for a check raise with the boat. And also if he has a 9, if I bet here, there's a reasonable chance he check folds. Because I could have a hand like 5-6 of spades. I could have a straight, I could have a set myself. So even if he has a 9, there's a reasonable chance that he check folds if I bet. So I think checking back for pot control here, or just checking back because I can't really get called by worse and he could check raise, is best. And he had ace-9. So I'll probably take a note about that, that he donk bet it. In my spot, if I had a 1 pair hand, it would be a good spot to actually bet to turn it into a bluff, trying to bluff him off trips. That would probably be worth it. Here the fish donks and the board is pretty drawy, lots of pair plus draw combos that he can have, so I'm not gonna slow play, I just want to stack him, especially because of his stack size. I can easily get all the money in on the turn. Now the king is unfortunate because it's a scare card for him, but a smaller bet size is a little bit awkward because it will leave him with a very small stack behind to play with on the river. If I bet like 20 here and he check calls, then the pot will be almost $90 and he'll have $20 behind on the river. So the turn bet is almost like a shove to him anyway, and in that case it's better to just jam here and actually stack his draws instead of letting him check call and then check fold the river for his last 20. So despite the king kinda sucking because he might fold the hand like a7, I think it's still a shove. I'll speed up until I get a hand. Could actually have 3-bet bluffed here with the suited queen against his button min raise, but over the small sample he seems quite loose aggressive. He has already been 3-bet 3 times and he only folded once, so opted just to fold there. Now finally taking that note on the fish that I accidentally took on the wrong guy before. Oh yeah. Here I made it $5 on the button with queen 4 off and got called by, it could be a either a fish or a tight passive regular, or maybe a tight aggressive regular that simply hasn't gotten any raising hands yet, but he has gotten a couple of calling hands, because of his pre-flop stats 22-6, but it's a very small sample. Anyway, the flop comes really dry, so c-bet half pot pretty standard. 9 is not a good card to barrel. He probably has some sort of pair, king, flush draw. So I give up, and then he bets $6 on the river. Now the board made 2 pair, so all pairs under a 7 got counterfeited. I don't think he's value betting an ace, because what worse can he get called by? His bet size looks like a value bet. It's a really small bet, it wants to get called. But I don't think he's ever value betting an ace here. He could have pocket 8s. I think if he has something like pocket 9s or a king, he probably bets larger. So it looks more like a 7 or something, but a 7 he probably doesn't call from the small blind pre-flop. And yeah, flush draws missed. Under pairs got counterfeited. So yeah, with these incredible pot odds I get, I think I have to look him up, just hoping that he has a counterfeited under pair or some sort of flush draw. And if it was a value bet with like pocket 8s, then also get a read on his bet size when he wants a call. So yeah, I look him up, and he actually had pure air for out of position float on the flop. Speed it up again until I get a hand. I forget to talk about any hands that you have questions about, just ask me. I might miss a few hands accidentally. Here I fold the king 10 off, despite it being a pretty small raise, because he seems to be a regular, small sample. He could be a fish, but he's probably not raising any worse kings from the cutoff, and I just get myself in bad spots. If you raise button, I would definitely call. If it was suited, I would also definitely call. Here I fold 6-7 in the small blind just because it's that guy. I would open it against like 95% of players, but not against him. Flop second pair against a fishy seeming player. If he had a good king, he'd probably have 3-bet pre-flop. So there is merit in c-betting to let him check call with pocket 8s or a worse 10. But I can also check back to induce bluffs. The more likely, against a fish you should lean towards checking, and as a regular you should lean towards betting, I think. And I'm starting to lean towards thinking he's actually a fish, so I went for the check. And on the turn I could still check back, but he could still have a hand like 10-9, queen 10, pocket 9s that he can check call with. Also, if he was gonna bluff at it, he probably does it on the turn. So by checking, I only give him another free card. And he never has a king when he checks. So yeah, he could have a jack, but even a hand like ace jack probably bets the turn, queen jack probably bets the turn. So I'm not too worried about him having a jack. There are probably more combos than that I'm ahead of than combos that I'm behind when he check calls. So it's a thin value bet and also some protection. But I really don't think he's gonna bluff the river if he checks the turn. Here I flop a second pair in a multi-way pot. I could check for pot control, but we have seen this guy donk bet before when he flopped the top pair in the ace-9 against the 6-7 hand. So I think it's more likely that he has air when he checks now. And in that case, there's only one player who can have me beat at this point, so it's like c-betting in a heads-up pot. In a heads-up pot I would probably check this back, but the thing is, if both of them have air, then there are now 4 overcards to my pair instead of just 2. So there's more value in protecting my hand. So I am gonna c-bet it just to fall out air. Yeah, and if my only goal is to fall out air, then I don't have to bet large. If they have a hand like Jack 10, what are they supposed to do about this bet? Here you 2 killers raised under the gun. I called with pocket 3s. I could bet the flop, but for protection. But if he check calls, I kinda have to triple barrel because he very often has a hand like pocket 9s, pocket 10s, king jack. He might even be check calling with. So it's kinda close between betting and checking. If I had a hand with some more potential, like 5-6 of diamonds, where I can actually pick up some equity, then I'd like a flop bet better to fall out as air, and then when he does check call, I can barrel when I pick up some sort of draw. But with pocket trees, I think it's better to just check it down. If he has air, I expect him to mostly be betting at the turn now. The 9 brings some draws that his missed broadways can have. So yeah, I'm probably beat here, but after I check the flop I can't really represent anything anymore if I double barrel, so it's still best to just give up and check down. Maybe I could take it down with an overbet on the river. But yeah, he had king queen, which is kinda unexpected because he picks up a gut shot on the turn, so he should probably have just bet at it. Here you can represent pocket tens, a jack that he checked on the flop, turn set of nines. You can just fold out my lower pairs. I'm considering a 3-bet here with the king 7 because I haven't been 3-betting at all at this table. My only 3-bet was with the pocket jacks when I 5-bet shoved. So my image is pretty good to 3-bet. But the problem is that there's a fish in the big blind, and a lot of my 3-bettable hands are very good for flatting in this case. And king also ain't as good as an ace for 3-bet bluffing, so I decided to fold there. If I had an offsuit ace, I'd probably have 3-bet. Here I can c-bet with ace jack, but he's probably not folding any pair, and he can have some draws on this board. The fish is also not folding any pair obviously, or any draw. And the only hands that I really make him fold are missed overs, and the same goes for the fish. And if they have missed overs, ace jack beats missed overs mostly, just like pocket threes, but ace jack actually has more equity because they likely have less out. If they have jack 10, then ace jack is way better than pocket threes. And even if they have a hand like king queen, then the ace jack has more outs to redraw on the river if they hit. So yeah, I think checking back here is favorable. If I had a hand like pocket threes, I'd probably just bet to take it down. Q2 killers probably has king queen or something when he bets at it here. He seems pretty straightforward, so I don't think he's making some sort of random bluff. Had the fish folded, I would also just have folded. And if I had checked the back a hand for pot control on the flop, even if I had a hand like 8-9, I'd probably just fold here. Considering a 4-bet bluff here because the player has already 3-bet before over the small sample, so I'm just checking to see from what position that 3-bet was. If it's from the blind, then it's likely that he's 3-betting light from the blinds, but if it was for middle position or cutoff, then he likely just had a premium there, and then it doesn't mean anything. And I think that was the case, which is why I folded. Here this player donks, and this is a bit of a annoying spot because I have checked back the pocket nines when he had the boat, and because of that I think he's gonna be more inclined to lead when he hits. So I think when he bets here, he very often has some sort of medium ace or weak ace. No, he's not betting with the jack, it's an ace or nothing, and if he had a set or something he probably bets larger. So it really smells like he has ace 9 or worse. But he's betting really small, and I do have a bluff catcher. But yeah, I get great pot odds, but I really think he has an ace very often here. I do have good implied odds on hitting a 10, even though it's only 2 outs, it will still happen like 5% of the time, and I'll probably be able to get a raise and a river check call out of him. So that's in favor of calling flop. Yeah, on the turn I should probably just be folding here. Oh, actually did fold, okay. I kind of remembered, or I can remember calling him down and him showing down ace 8. Maybe that hand will happen later. Not the greatest board for c-betting, but since he's likely donking when he hits, I can take some made hands out of his range, and then it's better to just bet. When he does check call there, then he likely has either second pair or a draw, and that puts me in a great spot to double barrel on the turn, because if I bet large there, he probably folds his second pairs, but he will still call with draws. So I fold out better and get called by worse at the same time. So if it's close between c-betting and checking, then the flop c-bet sets up the turn double barrel, so that would make it a clear c-bet. Here he's betting very large. Last time when I think he had the ace, he was betting on the smaller side, so this could be a total bluff, it could be a draw, it could also be a strong hand, I don't really know. But he is a bit tilted against me because I checked back the pocket nines against his boat. And even if he is bluffing or semi-bluffing, there's a reasonable chance he bets again on later streets, and if I call here, I kinda have to play a big pot with him when my hand sucks, so I think it's safer to just fold here, let him have it. Now here with the jack 4 suited, this is a good spot to 3-bet bluff. I'm not sure if I actually did it, but yeah, I should definitely have 3-bet bluffed that. For the same reasons that I was considering the 3-bet bluff with the king 7 offsuit before. Could even 3-bet the 7-5 suited there. Here on this table I 3-bet the short stacked fish, and he called for half a stack instead of shoving. And a flop second pair. Now if he has any pair, he's stacking off anyway, and there aren't really many pairs I can get value from on that board. There are probably as many jacks in his range as he has under pairs to my 10s. So the only reason to shove the flop would be to protect against his air. But there's a reasonable chance that he just spews off his stack if he has air, so I don't really want to fold air out, so I just check back with the intention of calling off my stack when he bluffs off the rest. I'll speed it up again until I get a hand. Flop a flush draw here. He has donked with the ace-9 on the 9 high flop. So when he checks here, I think I can discount aces from his range. That donk could have been specific because there was a fish and he was afraid that I check back air or something, but it could also just be that he likes donking when he hits. So whether he's actually donking an ace on this board as well, maybe a 30% chance or something, but I can discount aces a little bit. But yeah, when I check back the flop, I represent showdown value anyway, and I can still bluff him off hands like pocket fives on the turn. There's no need to bet the flop for that. And also I have really good equity against his air, so I don't mind keeping his air in to actually induce turn bluffs. So I opt to check back here. I can either raise or call the turn. Especially if the turn is a spade and he bets, I can call, because now I look like flopped air that turned the flush draw and is now calling, and then when the flush draw misses on the river, he's probably check calling me with any pair and paying me off. But yeah, he doesn't bet, so now I'll just bet to fall out hands like pocket fives. At least I think I bet. I'm betting what I would bet if I had a hand like queen jack. It's a dangerous flop for c-betting. I raised from middle position and he called from the cutoff. Most players have a pretty strong calling range there, quite Broadway heavy and pocket pair heavy. All Broadways hit. The worst Broadway here is ace-10 or ace-king, I guess that's the worst. And even ace-king is probably not folding. So the only hands that fold to a c-bet here are pocket pairs, and I'm beating those anyway, so there's no real point in c-betting. Now whether I should check call or check fold, that's close. He's probably checking back hands like ace-jack for pot control. So when he bets, his range is quite draw heavy and under pair heavy. The range is quite polarized with under pairs draws and really strong hands. So that range will likely fire barrels if I check call the flop. So if I check call, I kind of have to be prepared to call him down light. And I have already triple check called him with the ace-10 offsuit hand against his queen-10. So I don't think he's really necessarily gonna triple barrel bluff me here. So I think if he does bet the flop, I have to check fold. But he checks back, so I probably have the best hand. Now I could bet here to protect against a flush draw, but I think if he has a flush draw, if he has a better flush draw than mine with broadways, if the broadways missed, he would have bet the flop. When they hit, he's not folding anyway because he has a pair, and the only other flush draws are from his pocket pairs that I'm beating, so there's still no need to bet the turn. And now here on the river, I opt to value bet because I think on the turn when I check twice, he can be really sure that I don't have a queen. So if he has a hand like ace-jack, there's a reasonable chance that he bets it for value or protection on the turn. Also king-jack off is probably not in his calling range here. So his range is like jack-10 suited and ace-jack that beats me. And there's a reasonable chance he bets ace-jack on the turn. Jack-10 suited, there's only 3 combos. But he has hero called me before in the very first hand of the session, where I checked the flop and then double barreled, and he called me down with the pocket deuces on the monotone paired board when he had no flush draw. So I think if I bet here, he might actually look me up with a hand like pocket fives, maybe. So I opted to value bet. He could also have 7-8 suited or so. And he called and he had the ace jack, so that's fine. That happens when you value bet thin. And I take a note on him that he doesn't value bet thin, because he could do it on the turn, but he didn't, so it's good to know. Decide to check fold this flop because it's very bad, it hits a lot. I'll speed it up again until I get in a spot. Here I see bet on the larger side against the fish with the top pair, because there are a lot of draws that he'll likely check call with. Here with pocket deuces, in order to open small pairs from under the gun, there has to be some sort of fish at the table that will pay you off if you flop a set. When you miss, you have one of the worst hands for bluffing. Your hand is offsuit and it's not a connector either. It's just, you're essentially playing only a deuce. So there are very few draws that you can pick up and barrel with. And even if you flop your set, the board texture will on average be drier, because if you flop a set with a baby pair, then one of the cards on the flop has to be a baby card, and as a result the board will be drier. So when you hit your set, the board will be drier, and when you fire barrels from under the gun on a dry board, you get a lot of credit anyway. So it's really hard to get value from one pair of hands. The only hands that will be guaranteed to give you action are higher sets, or maybe over pairs that they trapped pre-flop. But yeah, there's just not a lot of value you get when you hit, and when you miss, you have the worst hand for bluffing. So they should be small baby pairs should be folds by default, unless you have a reason to raise. So I'm just looking at the players behind me here, and see no reason to raise, so I folded. Here the guy min raises in blind versus blind. Min raises are very often weak, so I just 3-bet him here. If he folds, that's fine. I win $6 straight away. And when he calls, that's also fine, because then he'll likely check fold a lot of flops. I create a lot of dead money by 3-betting. Here with the pocket sevens, it's reasonable to go for a triple barrel here, because if he check calls, he very often has a one pair hand, like pair plus draw, and they'll very often check call, and then check fold. So it's either a triple barrel or a give up. I think betting once there is kind of bad. And I opted to just check. When he bets the turn, it's a pretty easy fold. Here, this ace king hand, I 3-bet against under the gun open and I get shoved on. This is almost never a bluff. People generally don't bluff against small blind 3-bets when they open from under the gun. And if he's not bluffing, then his range is likely queens plus, ace king plus, and then this is a fold. But before I recorded this session, I tried recording as well, but I played on 3 tables for ages and there were a lot of dead stretches, so I deleted that footage. But I played some against him and he is not a standard regular. He was doing some splashy things. Can't quite remember what exactly he did, but oh yeah, I remember him 3-betting with no history. He 3-bet queen jack suited on the button against my cutoff open, which almost every regular would just flat call. He 3-bet it, and then we also played some non-standard post-flop spots. So against a normal regular, this is definitely a fold. because they're not bluffing and I don't have enough equity to call. But this guy, I have seen him doing some goofy stuff, so there is at least some sort of chance that he randomly does this with air, or maybe with ace queen or pocket fives or something. They're just since I don't know his exact range here, I'm just guessing, and because he has shown some unorthodox things, there's a chance that he's doing something unorthodox here as well, and that increases my equity in general. So I opted to call, even though I think it's still pretty close. And normally I'd also flat call ace king pre-flop here. For exactly this reason, they just play tight against it. And when they 4-bet, you're in an ugly spot. But against him, because we had that history, I opted to 3-bet, hoping I could get more value out of him than out of the average regular. And he ended up having pocket kings. So sorta cooler, pretty close. Here I'm 3-betting again against his $4 open. Last time he folded, so I'm just gonna keep doing it until I see he starts calling. So he called, and this is a bad flop for c-betting because it hits pretty much everything except under pairs and a7 and under. But the c-bet here, if I c-bet half pot, it only has to work 1 in 3 times. And when he check calls, there are some scare cards that I can barrel. Well, mostly an ace. He might also have a draw, and then maybe I'm able to check it down on a 4 or a 6, or maybe hit a 4 or a 6, take a free card, and then suck out on the river with 2 pair of trips or something. Even when he calls my c-bet, my EV in the hand is not 0. I still have a very small amount of EV. So the c-bet actually has to work less than 1 in 3 times. Probably like 28% of the time or so, 29%. And I think that deuces through sevens and a7 through ace deuce are probably roughly 28% of his range. Maybe not, it's pretty close. But despite the board being that bad for c-betting, a c-bet can still be correct just because it's such a cheap bluff. It has to work very infrequent. Flop bottom pair against Korean hacker. I don't have any hands on him because I'm on a new computer, so I don't have my old database. But I recognize his screen name, and if I recognize his screen name, that means he was probably playing these stakes as well a year ago or so, maybe even longer. And if he has been playing these stakes for at least a year and still hasn't moved up, then there's a very reasonable chance that he's just a mass tabling tag fish, or he might be winning, but a weak tight mass tabler. So despite being readless on him, I'll play him as if he is a confirmed weak tight regular. So when he bets a turn here, I'm definitely folding. And also now that he checks, he could be check calling with an overpair here, but I don't think he can ever really call the river because I can have boats and flushes here, and he only beats pairs or floats or pairs being turned into bluffs. And I actually checked back. And I don't think that the average NL200 weak-tied regular will put pairs being turned into bluffs in your range. So yeah, I think it's a mistake that I checked the turn here. I should have double barreled. Just bomb turn and bomb river. You almost always get a fold. Now that I've checked back, if he has a flush, there's no way he's check folding. And if he doesn't have a flush, I have the best hand. So this looks like a check back. I could bet him to bluff him off a better ace that he rivers. But I think there are more flushes in his range than ace X beating me. And he bets himself. I could jam here to represent the boat, or but yeah, that's probably no good. He might even have aces. Maybe he checked the boat himself. He might not even fold a nut flush if I shove. So pretty clear fold, I think. Could also be a pure bluff that he's making, but most weak-tied regulars don't really bluff much on the river, so I'll just assume that he doesn't bluff river until I actually see him do it. I'll speed up for the rest of the video. It's taking quite long because of the pauses. I'll just play it at high speed and only pause when I have to make a decision. There's at least one more interesting hand coming up. Yeah, well, actually I'll just fast forward to that hand and stop the video after that. Try to keep it under an hour. Here flop an open-ended straight flush draw. Yeah, I 3-bet bluffed him on the button against cutoff, and he called it. Now, if he calls out of position with a pair, he's probably not check folding this flop. If he called with a suited connector, he's generally smacking the board. So I think it's best to just check back here. I can, I have so much equity, I can call a turn bet, and I don't really fall out better. I have to fire barrels to fall out better, and I think I get check shoved on a lot if I bet here, and then I'm just flipping a lot. So instead of flipping on the flop and just giving him 50% equity, I rather keep my positional advantage and play some poker with him. So I check it back. Pink. Right, he bets here. I could raise. Yeah, I ended up calling here, but I think I should have raised. The problem with calling here is that it looks like I have a flush, and the hands that I check back on the flop that have a flush draw here are likely broadways, because hands like ace X offsuit that I 3-bet bluff, like a7 off, and that means that I have pretty good flush when I call, so he probably won't bluff me on the river. And if he's not gonna bluff me on the river, then the only hands I get value from are nut flushes, and I stack nut flushes anyway if I raise here. Also, by calling I can't represent a bluff, but by raising here I can represent a bluff. So I think it's a mistake here to flat. So yeah, on the river that went a little bit fast. I bet full pot. Just because if he has something like he ended up having pocket jacks, but if he has a hand like that, he's either the type to check fold or the type to check call. People don't really use pot odds in this spot. I mean, it is a clear check fold in his spot. When I bet, he only beats a pure bluff, so he has to make a hero call. And when you're making a hero call, pot odds don't really matter. You just you just go for it, kinda. So that's why I bet on the larger side, hoping that he would make a hero call, which is what he did with pocket jacks, with the jack of hearts. And I think that's a really clear fold in his spot. That's a poor check call. So kind of happy that he did make that hero call. But that wasn't the interesting hand that I could remember. I think the next one will be quite short after that. Oh, another interesting hand here. Button opens, I flat, and he c-bets the flop. Now I have a backdoor flush draw, I have reasonable high cards. He's probably c-betting all his air, so I'm not gonna check fold. So I can do two things. I can out of position float or check raise. If I check raise the flop, then I don't really represent very much. But if I check call, I actually represent the bluff catcher. So if he has air, if I check raise the flop, he might float me, 3-bet bluff me. But if I check call, he probably shuts down on the turn. And then I can bet the river and he folds. Even if he's hits some sort of second pair, when I bet the river he just has to put me on an ace. And he will fold anyway. Also by check calling, I allow myself to take a check call check raise line, and the check raise on the turn looks a lot stronger than a check raise on the flop. So on the flop I never get to fold him an ace, but on the turn he might even fold ace king if I check raise him. So since I have a backdoor flush draw, that gives me some good cards to check raise on. In this case only diamonds. So I opted to out of position float with the intention of bluffing any river when he checks back, and check raising him on the turn if I pick up equity, and otherwise check fold. In this case I pick up equity, so I go for the check raise, and the size it so that the river is a pot size shove, and he ended up time bank folding, or tank folding, which you couldn't really see because it was at high speed. I think that 10-8 offsuit hand on the top right was a pretty big pot, but I think it was a somewhat boring pot. I can quickly see it here. I 3-bet him again, he calls. He calls my c-bet. Oh yeah, this is actually somewhat interesting, the double barrel. On this flop, he likely has random overs and ace highs, and they will all check call. Check call the flop. He's a little bit tilted against me, not folding too many c-bets, so I expect him to call pretty light. So even though it's, don't expect to get many folds, that actually means that I'll get more folds on the turn. When he check calls his king jack and then check folds there. So I opted to double barrel, and he check call, and then donked. So he probably had a flush or something. Could be a total bluff, but probably a flush or an overpair. So I just fold the river. Alright, so that was it. The one hand that I had in mind was probably from the tree tabling session where I ended up deleting the footage. Right, yeah, so sorry about the rushed ending. The video was running a bit over time. So let me know if you have any questions, and this was GrindCore for Deuces Cracked.